So now it is my great honor to introduce Samuel Lopez, the Development Director of the Gabriel Tongva San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, who will welcome us to our space today.
Meiha, Yahayahia, Nabayane Samuel Lopez, Nande San Gabriel Tanvet. Hello and welcome everyone. As they mentioned, my name is Samuel Lopez and I'm the Development Director for the San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians. But first and foremost, I am a descendant of the first people that inhabited this land, San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, Gabriel Tongva, and our tribe has been here since time immemorial. The territory of our people is what is commonly known as Gary LA Basin, Orange County, and the 4 Southern Channel Islands. Just gonna wait for a sec. Nice. This place has served as a place of sustenance and culture for the first people who stewarded this land. And today and always we honor the enduring presence and resilience of Gabriel Tongva people, past, present, and future. We acknowledge the Tongva peoples as traditional land caretakers of Tavangar, in which we gather here together in community. And we honor and pay our respects to Hunufektam, Ahihorom, and Yochinem, ancestors, relatives, and elders, as we move forward in a good way on unceded Gabriel Tongva land. And for my people, and what we'll hear about a lot today, is that colonization, displacement, and erasure are not distant histories. They're ongoing realities. Systems were deliberately built to silence our voices, seize our land, and fracture our communities. This is why remembering matters, and why memory itself becomes an act of resistance. It allows us to carry the strength of our ancestors through ever-changing difficulties, like difficult landscapes, and reminding us that we still hold the power to create meaningful change. Events like this remind us that democracy is not a static achievement, but a continuous practice. True democracy requires that we listen to each other's stories, confront injustices honestly, and build spaces where all voices, especially those long marginalized, can shape our collective future. Because the work of preserving democracy requires not only just the knowledge of the past, but the courage to act in the present. And for First Peoples, the power of place is not a symbolic one. It is lived every day in our responsibilities to the land, to our communities, and to our future generations. Because our languages, our songs, and our practices carry histories that no law can erase and no monument can fully capture. They remind us that no authority can ever silence a people anchored in their land and their culture. And it challenges how we continuously define freedom and responsibility. So today and always, I ask you not only to acknowledge the land that you're on, and Gabriel Tongva land that we are currently, again, residing on, but to act in relationship with it. To learn more about those whose land you're on, support Gabriel Tongva-led efforts for recognition and justice, protect land and water, and continue to refuse narratives that flatten history or make domination seem inevitable. Because as we've all going to hear about today, echoes of history are not silent. They speak through this place and its people and everywhere we go. And if you listen, they call for courage, accountability, and action. And in a world that often resists truth and love, being alive is still such a gift. With that gift comes responsibility to work patiently and courageously towards something better for generations to come. May it be a call to action grounded in responsibility to the land and who has stood here before us and who will stand here after us. So thank you and welcome to my ancestral homeland, Oweshkonecha.
It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Japanese American National Museum in our Democracy Center. Today's symposium, The Echoes of History, Inspiring Civil Action and Building Democracy, must be one of many actions to bring communities together to address the ongoing threat to social justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion. In my capacity as board chair, well, first I should recognize we have some other board members here, because this issue is an issue that is close to us and defines who we are. In my capacity as board chair, I've welcomed many people to JANM. First, by stating that it's our mission to preserve and share the history, struggles, and achievements of Japanese Americans, with the hope that what happened to our community in 1942 never happens again to another community. Today, that hope has become a fear and a stark reality because of the current threats to democracy, social justice, dignity, and civil rights. JANM, as we affectionately call our facility, is more than just a museum, folks. It's more than just bricks and mortar. It's a place of purpose that was built on this site because it represents hollow ground for our community. In 1942, the U.S. government invoked the Alien Enemies Act to deport hundreds of individuals of Japanese heritage, and then issued Executive Order 9066 that led to the incarceration of 125,000 individuals of Japanese heritage. The majority were American citizens. In the plaza outside, they were forced onto buses and taken to camps, which in the congressional record has labeled them as America's concentration camps. They were deprived of their civil rights and due process and incarcerated behind barbed wires in desolate areas of the United States. Sadly, there's an absolute parallel to what happened to my community in 1942 and what's happening today to immigrant communities throughout the nation. 1 year ago, the current administration, I won't say the name because I got a gag reflex, signaled its intent to attack institutions who support and advocate for social justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Because of the serious threat of losing federal funding and potential lawsuits, many institutions decided to scrub their websites, their documents, and their programs of any reference to DEI, and to shut down programs that support these initiatives. In February of 2025, our board met to discuss this issue. It was a very lively discussion, folks, full of passion, full of commitment. And we unanimously decided to take a strong and affirmative actions to ensure we stay true to our mission and purpose. JANM proudly proclaimed that we will scrub nothing, that we will continue to be a beacon and a voice for social justice, civil rights, and democracy. And understand now, when I say scrub nothing, I speak to the position we took as it relates to JANM. But scrub nothing has a much broader application. The administration is trying to scrub history, is trying to scrub information at our parks, in our museums, and other documents. I would hope that in time, starting with now, that our battle cry of scrub nothing becomes a national battle cry, that we would not let this administration scrub anything. We took our position to honor our immigrant grandparents who came to America seeking a better life, like all immigrants have done. And our parents who both fought for this country and stood up against the violation of their civil rights. Remember, in 1942, during World War II, Japanese Americans volunteered to fight for this country. They fought, they had amazing achievements while their families were behind barbed wires in concentration camps. As this symposium takes place, and as you consider the echo of histories in your discussion, I hope you remember the loudest echo that occurred in 1942 when the Japanese American community was deprived of social justice and civil rights and incarcerated. This was the resounding echo of silence, folks, because very few people stood up for the Japanese American community. They were silent. This cannot happen again. JANM will not be silent while the rights of other individuals are violated. We will stand up for other marginalized communities and speak to the importance of social justice. We proudly support all immigrant communities because we are children of immigrants. We are an immigrant community. This is the time for all of us to stand together for civil action, democracy as one community. JANM's voice is stronger than ever. However, our collective voices will be stronger. As the great John Lewis said, let's get into good trouble together. Thank you for your commitment to social justice, civil rights, and democracy. This is a time for all of us to join together as one community and to stand up and say what's going on is wrong. And to, most importantly, protect our immigrant communities. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our President and CEO, Ann Burroughs. Yeah. Some of you, this may be your first time to JANM. We're going through a renovation right now. Please come back in November of this year. But for some of you, you may not have met Ann. Take the time, look at her background. There's no one who's been a stronger champion of human rights and social justice. For we at JANM, she's the perfect person to lead us through this difficult time. And so, ladies and gentlemen, please, Ann Burroughs.
Welcome to all of you. Welcome to our symposium. All of you, each one of you is an honored guest. We're so grateful that you're here.
Recording in progress.
We're so... Those echoes of history again. Do we have it now? Okay. And also a special thank you to our extraordinary guests, some of whom have traveled across the country to be with us. It sort of almost feels like an understatement to say that we're gathering at a time of profound consequence. Cities across our country are occupied. Terror is stalking the streets, and tens of thousands of our friends, of our community members across the country have been kidnapped, have been disappeared, have been incarcerated, and have been deported. And it also feels to me that we know what we're seeing here, the gathering of authoritarianism, we're also seeing the world over. And whether it's here or whether it's in other countries around the world, it's always marked by the erosion of civil liberties, the silencing of dissent, the manipulation of truth, and the normalization of cruelty. Civic space is shrinking. Democratic norms are under strain in a way that they haven't been before. Fear is increasingly weaponized to divide communities, scapegoat the vulnerable, and concentrate the power in the hands of the few. For us at JANM, as Bill has said, and for many people in the audience, this is not an abstract moment. It's deeply and painfully familiar. We were founded, or we may not have been founded on this principle, but certainly for us, one of the principles that has become so unbelievably powerful is that it's quite a radical principle, I think. For us, memory is not passive. It's an act of resilience, but more importantly, increasingly, it's now become an act of resistance. And what do we do with that? And something of the symposium today, I hope, will capture that. Our community knows, as Bill outlined, as do communities of color throughout the country. They know what happens when racism is legalized, when fear overrides constitutional rights, when propaganda replaces truth, and when democratic institutions fail to protect those who are most at risk. And that history isn't behind us. I don't need to tell people in this room, because it's speaking to us now more urgently than it ever has. Bill spoke about the statement that our trustees released a year ago. And note that it was within 2 weeks of Trump's administration. And I should say that yesterday was the anniversary, the first anniversary of that. But it's important to note that when our trustees made that call, it was reaffirming this institution's commitment to defending democracy and civil rights, to preserving memory as resistance, to standing up against racism in all its forms, xenophobia in all its forms, and a very, very deep institutional commitment to uplifting diverse voices, to build bridges across communities. And this symposium is a direct pledge. I would also say that we were the first museum in the country to take a stand. And for several months, it was over 2 months, we were the only museum to do that. And as Bill said, in 1942, nobody stood up for Japanese Americans. So for our trustees, the statement they made was as much as a protection of legacy as it was potentially, possibly, could have been an act of defiance. But it was more about standing up for legacy. We also felt that it was enormously important. Nobody stood up for Japanese Americans in 1942. We felt an obligation to do so for other museums that didn't have the luxury, that didn't have their boards, that didn't have their communities, that didn't have their cities behind them. And was also for a way for us to be able to stand up for communities that were at risk. It was also for us to be able to stand up for our immigrant brothers and sisters who were being attacked. So this symposium, as I said earlier, is a direct expression of that pledge. Echoes of History, for us, this symposium is an act of collective witnessing and an invitation to move from recognition to responsibility. We all recognize what the situation is, but it's also an opportunity for us to move from dialogue to action. How do we take action? From memory to moral courage. Memory is fine. Memory could just be nostalgia and remembrance. But when it's imbued with moral courage, it's a very, very different act. So what we hope to do with our program today is to take you on a very deliberate journey. We begin by trying to see clearly what's at stake globally, confronting the global rise of authoritarianism and the shrinking of civic space as those forces are already shaping our lives and our own futures. How do we grasp that future? What do we do to take control of that? We also want to take you to a point where we hope that you will learn deeply from community leaders resisting repression, building solidarity and civic power under extraordinary pressure. We'll also act locally, grounding the global challenges, the national challenges, in the lived realities of Los Angeles, a city that's shaped by contradiction and creativity, by inequity and possibility, by courage and extraordinary courage and resilience, as our communities have stood up to the terror that's been stalking our streets. We will end the day by thinking about how we can create together boldly, recognizing that art, culture, and imagination are not luxuries in times of crisis. They're survival tools. They're the language of resilience. They're the language of resistance. They're the language of belonging. But importantly, they're the language of joy. Because without that joy, we can't build the resilience for the long haul and the long struggle that is ahead. And for us at JANM, it's probably clear to all of you, we don't believe that museums can be neutral. Museums shape public memory. We influence whose stories are told and who tells them. Museums hold the truths of communities, of elders, of ancestors, and they ensure, certainly for us at JANM, we ensure that history will not ever yield to censorship or erasure. We know also that authoritarianism doesn't arrive all at once. It advances gradually, often by targeting institutions that preserve inconvenient truths. That's why we insist defending culture, defending history, defending truth is defending democracy. Defending diversity is defending democracy. Preserving memory is not about nostalgia. It's about power, about who gets to define the past and therefore who gets to shape the future. And this symposium, we're not expecting that it's going to offer easy answers, but we do hope that it will offer something essential. We do hope that it will provide a space, a shared space, to reckon honestly, to imagine boldly, and to commit collectively. And before I go into introducing our first keynote, I want to leave you with three things. They're not particularly profound, but they were things that I thought about this morning. The first, and we've heard this already, we will hear this again. History is not over. Democracy is not self-sustaining. And none of us can do this work alone.